The arena shook with the sound of alien drums, each beat echoing like thunder across the massive stone walls. Thousands of alien eyes glowed in the shadows, staring down at the battleground where blood still marked the sand. The trial of warriors was over, and against all odds, the human had won. Daniel stood there, chest heaving, his shirt torn, skin bruised and bleeding, but his eyes steady. Around him, the fallen alien champions lay silent, their massive armored bodies proof of how impossible this victory should have been. Yet the human still stood, sword in hand, refusing to bend, refusing to die. High above, on the throne of black stone, the alien ruler rose. His voice boomed across the arena, filled with both disbelief and pride in the savage tradition. The law is clear. The victor shall be rewarded as our ancestors decreed. He shall be given the honor of the first knight. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and roars of anger, many spitting on the ground, furious that an outsider, a weak human, had survived when their greatest warriors had fallen. Daniel looked up, trying to understand the meaning behind the words. He had heard rumors of this tradition, but he never thought it would fall upon him. His heart raced as the ruler continued. The first knight belongs to the victor. The chosen companion is none other than Princess Lyra, daughter of this house, sworn to tradition. Gasps filled the air. All eyes turned to the high balcony where Lyra stood frozen. She was tall, with silver markings across her skin, a crown of light resting gently upon her dark hair. Her eyes widened in horror at the decree. Her lips parted, but no sound escaped. For her, this was not an honor, it was a sentence. The alien princess, pure and untouchable, was now ordered to share herself with the very creature her people despised most. The guards around her bowed their heads, but Lyra did not move. Her hands trembled as she gripped the railing, staring at the blood-stained human below. She had watched him fight. She had seen the way he refused to yield, even when crushed under blades and fists. But that did not make him her equal. He was an outsider, a savage from a backwater world. And now, by law, he was her victor. Daniel's heart sank as the words truly settled in. He had fought to survive, not to claim someone's body or honor. Yet the crowd chanted louder, some mocking, some celebrating, all demanding that tradition be followed. The drums began again, deep and merciless, sealing his victory with a price he never wanted to claim. Lyra turned sharply, her cloak swishing behind her as she left the balcony. Her voice was a whisper, barely carried by the wind, but Daniel's ears caught it through the silence in his mind. "I'd rather die than belong to a human." Those words pierced him harder than any blade in the arena. The ruler raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "Prepare the chambers. By dawn, the law shall be fulfilled. No victor leaves without his prize." His eyes locked on Daniel, sharp and judging. "And you, human, you have proven your strength, but strength comes with duty. You will not refuse." Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon, his thoughts swirling. Every instinct told him to run, to fight, to deny. But he was surrounded by soldiers, thousands of them, armored and loyal to the throne. One wrong move, and he would be struck down like an animal. He had survived the arena, but could he survive this? As he was escorted out, chains clinking against his bruised wrists, the whispers followed him through the halls. Alien servants sneered, muttering curses. Disgusting human. The princess will end her life before she yields. This is an insult to our people. Their hatred pressed in on him like a storm. Lyra, meanwhile, sat in her chamber, her mind burning with shame and fury. All her life, she had been told her first knight would bind her to a warrior of her race, chosen for his strength and nobility. That night was meant to mark the start of her future, to prove her worth as a daughter of the crown. Now it had been stolen from her by a stranger, a human who did not belong in her world. She clenched her fists, her nails cutting into her palms. She vowed to resist. Yet beneath her anger, a shadow of curiosity lingered. She remembered how he had stood after every blow, bleeding but unbroken. None of her kind had fought with such madness, such refusal to surrender. Why had he survived when giants had fallen? What made him different? She hated herself for wondering, but the question would not leave her mind. As the torches burned through the night, the palace prepared for the ceremony. The chamber was readied, guards posted outside, and the law of the ancients sealed both their fates. Daniel stared at the stars through a barred window, whispering to himself, "I never wanted this." Lyra stared at her reflection in the polished glass, whispering the same words. I never wanted this. But the drums of tradition did not care for their hearts. The law was merciless, and the dawn was coming. The stage was set for a night that neither of them could escape. The heavy doors closed behind her, and the sound echoed through the chamber like a final judgment. Lyra stood stiff near the entrance, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, her silver eyes burning with anger and humiliation. Daniel was already there, sitting quietly on the edge of a low bench, his body wrapped in bandages from the arena wounds. He did not look at her at first. His eyes were fixed on the flickering firelight that danced on the walls, as if he had no desire to claim what the law had forced upon him. Lyra's voice broke the silence, sharp as a blade. Do not think I will ever obey. Do not think I will ever share myself with you. Her words shook with both pride and fear, but she held her chin high. She expected the human to smirk, to lunge at her, to show the ugly hunger her people had always described. Instead, Daniel slowly lifted his gaze, his tired blue eyes meeting hers without a trace of desire. I don't want what's forced, he said simply. His voice was low, calm, carrying no threat. I don't want you like this. His words confused her more than she wanted to admit. She narrowed her eyes, refusing to let him see her surprise. You lie. All humans are the same. You want only to take. Daniel shook his head and reached for the pitcher of water on the table. His hand trembled slightly from exhaustion as he poured some into a cup. He stood and walked toward her slowly, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. Lyra stepped back instinctively, her heart racing, but instead of grabbing her, he held out the cup. You look thirsty, he said. She blinked, staring at the water. No one had ever offered her something so ordinary with such gentleness. She almost snatched it from his hand, but pride kept her still. I don't need your kindness, she spat. Then don't take it, Daniel answered, setting the cup on a small table near her before turning his back. He returned to the bench and sat again, his shoulders slumping, his expression unreadable. Lyra stood frozen, anger mixing with something she couldn't name. Why did he act this way? Was it a trick? A trap to make her lower her guard? She folded her arms tighter, refusing to let her thoughts betray her. Outside the chamber, the heavy steps of guards echoed through the corridor. Their shadows stretched across the gap under the door. Lyra knew what they were waiting for. Proof. The law demanded that the union be sealed, and if not, both she and this strange human would be punished. Her chest tightened. She had no choice, yet he behaved as if he did not care. Do you not fear them? She asked suddenly, her voice sharp. If you deny this law, they will kill you. Daniel lifted his eyes to the fire, his jaw tight. I've already faced death today. I'm not afraid of it anymore. His tone was steady, but his hands clenched against his knees. But I won't take something that isn't freely given, even if it costs me. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and for the first time, Lyra had no quick reply. Her people had taught her that humans were selfish, greedy, and without honor. Yet this one spoke of choice, of freedom, in a way that clashed with everything she had been told. The silence between them grew heavy, broken only by the crackle of firewood. Lyra walked slowly to the window, her long cloak dragging across the floor. She looked out at the alien city, glowing with strange lights and towers of stone and glass. Somewhere out there, people whispered about her shame. She could almost hear them laughing, calling her a prize for a creature beneath her race. She pressed her hands against the cold glass and whispered to herself, I will not break. Daniel's voice came softly from behind her. No one is asking you to. She turned sharply, glaring at him. You are the victor. You could demand it now, and the guards would cheer you on. He looked at her directly then, his gaze steady, almost defiant. I'm not here to please them. I'm not their animal. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She hated the way his words unsettled her, the way they made her question everything. She wanted him to be a monster, something easy to hate. But he was not acting like one. He was too calm, too stubborn, too human. The guards banged on the door suddenly, making her jump. A deep voice shouted, The night is passing. We expect proof. Daniel stood, his back straightening. He walked to the door and called out, You'll have your proof in the morning. His voice carried such certainty that even the guards went silent for a moment before muttering curses and stepping away. Lyra stared at him, astonished. You dare defy them like this? He shrugged, though tension showed in his shoulders. I'll figure something out. But you don't have to fear me. Her heartbeat quickened, though she forced her face to remain cold. You are strange, human. Strange and reckless. But do not think this changes anything. I will never choose you. Daniel gave a faint smile, one that carried both pain and strength. I don't need you to choose me. I just need to survive the night. He moved back to the bench, lying down with his hands behind his head as though daring the world to strike him. Lyra stood by the window, watching him. She could not understand him, but something inside her chest stirred, an uneasy feeling she could not silence. The law wanted her to hate him, but her heart whispered questions she could not answer. The fire burned lower, shadows stretched across the walls, and outside the chamber the guards waited, impatient for dawn. Inside, the princess and the human remained in silent defiance. Two enemies trapped together, both refusing to bow, both unsure what the night would bring. The night stretched long and heavy, the chamber filled with silence so thick it felt alive. Lyra stood near the window, her hands pressed against the cold glass, her body tense as if every muscle inside her refused to relax. Behind her, Daniel sat by the fire, his body tired, his wounds aching, yet his eyes stayed awake and sharp. He had fought monsters that day, but now he was trapped in a new kind of battle, one without swords, one that he could not win with strength. Lyra's mind raced. The law was merciless. If she did not surrender to the tradition, if she did not share her first night with the victor, they would both be killed. Her father's council would see to it. Her people would cheer for her blood, calling it justice. But how could she give herself to a human? It went against everything she had been taught, everything she believed. She clenched her jaw, her silver eyes glinting with anger and fear. Daniel did not speak for a long time. He let the silence hang between them, as if waiting for her to make her own choice. Finally, he said quietly, "You don't have to be afraid of me." His voice was calm, almost too calm. It made her chest tighten. "I am not afraid," she snapped, spinning to face him. "I would rather die than obey this law with you." Daniel studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then maybe we'll both die," he said softly, turning his eyes back to the fire. His answer shocked her. She expected him to argue, to demand his prize, to remind her that her refusal would mean his execution too. But he spoke of death as if it was already decided, as if he accepted it. That unsettled her more than any threat could. The guards outside stomped their boots, their shadows sliding under the door. They were listening, waiting, eager for proof. Lyra felt their presence like a chain around her throat. Every moment she hesitated, she knew their patience wore thin. She whispered, almost to herself, "If they kill us, they will call it tradition. They will not mourn." Daniel shifted on the bench, his tired eyes meeting hers again. "Then let them. But I won't take what isn't mine. Not this way." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You are a fool," she said. "Do you not care for your life?" "I care," he replied, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice grew sharper, filled with a fire that caught her breath. "But I care more about who I am. If I take you by force, I become what they already think of me, an animal. I won't give them that victory." For a moment, Lyra had no words. She turned back to the window, staring at the alien city glowing beneath the stars. The firelight flickered behind her, and in the reflection she saw his shape, wounded, broken, yet still unyielding. The image haunted her. The hours crawled by, each one heavier than the last. Lyra's heart pounded with every step of the guards outside. Her mind wavered between two choices: surrender and live, or resist and die. She had always been raised to protect her honor, but what honor was there in giving herself to someone she hated? Yet what honor was there in letting her people kill them both for defiance? She closed her eyes, her hands trembling against the window. "I do not understand you, human," she said quietly. Daniel's reply came after a pause. "You don't need to." The sudden pounding on the door made both of them jump. A deep voice shouted, "Time is nearly done. The council will demand proof by dawn. Do not test our patience." Lyra's stomach twisted. She turned to Daniel, fear flashing in her silver eyes. "They will not wait much longer," she whispered. Daniel stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the chamber. He walked to the door and placed his hand against it, speaking firmly through the heavy wood. "You'll have your proof when the sun rises, not before. The guards muttered curses, but their footsteps slowly retreated. The echo of their departure left a hollow silence behind. Lyra stared at him in shock. "You risk death so easily," she said. Daniel turned back to her, his face unreadable. "Better death than dishonor." Her chest tightened at his words. For so long she had believed her people held the highest code of honor, yet here was a human speaking of it with more conviction than many of her kind ever did. She hated the way her thoughts twisted, the way her heart responded to his defiance. He walked back to the bench and sat again, his back resting against the wall. He closed his eyes, but his voice remained steady. "I will not touch you unless you ask me to. That's my choice." The words struck her harder than she expected. No one had ever given her a choice before. Her life had always been commanded, by her father, by tradition, by the council. But this human, her enemy, her so-called victor, gave her freedom when he had every right by their law to take it away. The fire dimmed and shadows filled the chamber. Lyra stood by the window, her heart racing, her mind a storm of confusion. She told herself she still hated him, that she still despised what he represented. But deep inside, something new stirred, something she dared not name. The night grew colder, and neither of them slept. Daniel kept his word, keeping his distance, watching the flames burn lower. Lyra remained by the window, staring into the darkness, wondering if dawn would bring their deaths, or something else entirely. The fire burned low, filling the chamber with a soft orange glow. Daniel sat close to it, his body still sore from the battles earlier, but his mind restless. Lyra stood a few steps away, her arms wrapped around herself, her silver eyes fixed on him. She could not understand him. He was different from what she had been told. Every story about humans painted them as greedy, violent, desperate creatures. Yet this one sat quietly, refusing to demand what the law gave him. After a long silence, Daniel spoke, his voice calm but steady. "Do you know what rain is?" Lyra frowned. The question was strange. "Of course I know. Water that falls from the sky. Why do you ask?" Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes far away, as if he were looking through the stone walls to a place only he could see. "On my world, when I was a child, I used to run outside when it rained. The sky would open, and water would fall so hard it felt like the world was washing itself clean. My friends and I would play in the streets, splashing, laughing, soaking wet, until our parents dragged us inside. Those were the best days." Lyra blinked, caught off guard. She had never imagined humans laughing in the rain, never imagined them as children playing. "Why tell me this?" she asked, her voice colder than she felt inside. "Because," Daniel said, leaning back against the wall, "you look like someone who has never been allowed to play. Always duty, always rules, always eyes watching. Am I wrong?" Her breath caught. His words pierced too close. She turned away sharply. "You know nothing of me." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I know what it feels like to be trapped, to be told your path, your choices, even your worth." He paused, his voice quieter. "It's a cage, even if it's made of gold." Lyra's heart trembled. No one had ever dared say such things to her. No one had ever seen her not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a person. She hated that his words struck something deep inside, something fragile she had kept buried. She moved closer to the fire, her face half lit by its glow. "Why do you not take what is yours?" she asked suddenly, her voice low but filled with tension. "The law gives me to you. The guards wait for proof. Why do you refuse?" Daniel looked at her, his tired blue eyes meeting her silver ones. There was no hunger there, no cruelty, only a steady strength. "Because you're not a prize." He said, "You're a person." The words shook her more than she wanted to admit. She stared at him, searching for deceit, for mockery, but found none. He meant it. He truly meant it. Her chest tightened, her breath quickened. No man of her kind had ever spoken to her like that. To them, she was a jewel, a trophy, a duty. But to him, she was simply herself. The silence grew heavy again, but different this time. Not sharp, not hostile, but soft and strange. Lyra's eyes lingered on him longer than she intended. She noticed the scars across his arms, the marks of countless fights. She noticed the weariness in his face, but also the fire that never dimmed in his eyes. Against her will, she felt curiosity stirring inside her. She sat down across from him, her cloak pooling around her. The fire cracked between them, casting shadows that danced along the walls. "Tell me more of your world," she whispered, almost against her own pride. Daniel smiled faintly, surprised by her request. There are forests, he said softly. Tall trees, green and alive, stretching higher than you can imagine. When the wind moves through them, it sounds like the earth itself is singing. And there are oceans, vast waters that never end. The waves crash and roar, but they also whisper, gentle as a lullaby. That's where I feel free, more than anywhere. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, trying to imagine it. She had only known cold palaces, endless halls, and the eyes of watchers. No forests, no oceans, no laughter in the rain. For the first time in her life, she wondered what freedom might feel like. Her voice softened, almost breaking. Why do you fight so hard when you could have let yourself die in the arena? Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at the fire, his expression shadowed. Because I've lost too many already. Friends, family. I fight because if I stop, then their memory dies with me. I can't let that happen. I won't. Lyra's heart ached, though she did not understand why. She had been raised to see humans as less, but in this man she saw more strength than many warriors of her people. Not just strength of body, but of spirit. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire burned lower, and the night grew colder. Yet Lyra did not move away. She sat near him, watching the flames and stealing glances at his face when she thought he would not notice. Finally, she whispered so softly it was almost a confession. You are not what I expected. Daniel looked at her, his eyes gentle. And what did you expect? She hesitated, her cheeks warming with shame. A monster. He gave a faint, tired laugh, shaking his head. No, just a man. A man who doesn't want to be anyone's cage. Her heart raced, and she looked away quickly, afraid he might see too much in her eyes. She hated the way her chest felt lighter and heavier at the same time. She hated that part of her, wanted to believe him. The guards outside shifted, their armor clinking. Their presence reminded her of the law, the duty, the punishment that still waited if dawn came without proof. Yet for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something other than fear. She felt safe, even if only for a moment. The night stretched on, but now it did not feel like a prison. It felt like the start of something unknown, dangerous, but strangely alive. Lyra pulled her cloak tighter, her mind whispering things she dared not say aloud. For the first time, she wondered if this human was not her curse, but her chance. At dawn, the heavy doors of the chamber burst open without warning. Lyra flinched, her heart jumping into her throat as armored soldiers marched inside. Their boots struck the floor like hammers, and behind them came the alien commander, his tall frame wrapped in steel armor, his sharp eyes glowing with anger. The fire in the room had burned low, and the soft light of morning filtered through the windows, casting shadows across the stone floor. The commander's voice cracked through the silence like a whip. It is morning. The law demands truth. Has the union been fulfilled? His eyes narrowed, shifting from Lyra to Daniel, searching for weakness, for hesitation. Lyra's body stiffened, her lips trembling. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her mind screamed with panic. If she said no, they would both be executed. If she said yes, she would lose the last piece of honor she clung to. She felt the walls closing in around her, the weight of thousands of years of tradition crushing her chest. Daniel rose slowly to his feet. His body ached, his wounds still raw, but he stood tall, his face calm. He looked straight into the commander's eyes without fear. Yes, he said firmly. She is mine now. The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock through everyone. Lyra's head snapped toward him, her silver eyes wide. He had lied. He had claimed her without touching her. Her heart pounded in confusion, rage, relief, and something else she could not name. The commander's mouth curled into a cruel smile. Good. Then tradition is preserved. He stepped closer, towering over Daniel, his voice low and threatening. But know this, human. If she shows even a single sign of resistance, if she rejects you in public, the council will strip you of life. Our people do not forgive weakness. Do not test us. Daniel did not move, did not flinch. Understood, he said coldly. The commander's gaze flickered to Lyra, sharp and suspicious. And you, princess, you will honor the law, or you will watch him die slowly for your disobedience. His words cut like knives, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She lowered her eyes, not out of shame, but to hide the storm raging inside her. She could not let them see how shaken she was. The soldiers turned and left with the commander, their armor clattering down the corridor. The heavy doors slammed shut again, leaving the chamber heavy with silence. Lyra spun toward Daniel, fury flashing across her face. "Why?" she hissed. "Why would you claim me before them?" Daniel's expression was steady, almost calm, though his eyes carried the weight of his choice. "Because it was the only way to keep us alive. They would have killed you, and me with you. Now they think the law is satisfied." Her hands clenched into fists, her chest rising and falling quickly. "You risk your life with lies. If they discover the truth, they will tear you apart. They will tear me apart." "I know," he said, his voice softer now. He stepped closer, but not too close, leaving space between them. "But I would rather risk everything than see them break you. They wanted proof. I gave it to them. Now you are safe, at least for a while." Safe. The word echoed in her mind. No one had ever spoken it to her like that before. Her whole life she had been guarded, protected, locked away, but never truly safe. Yet here was this human, an outsider, risking his own life to shield her from her people. She hated how much it made her chest ache. Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes sharp but softer than before. "Why risk your life for me? I am not yours. I will never be yours." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Because I'd rather die than see you treated like a trophy. You deserve more than chains disguised as tradition." His words struck her harder than any blow. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the fire in his eyes left her silent. He spoke as if he believed every word, as if her worth was greater than even she believed. It made her feel both furious and fragile. The rest of the day passed slowly. Whispers filled the palace, servants spreading the story of the human who had claimed the princess. Everywhere Lyra walked, she felt their stares, some filled with hatred, others with cruel amusement. It was as if her body no longer belonged to her, but to the crowd's gossip. Each whisper felt like a blade. Daniel walked beside her in the halls, always silent, always watchful. She noticed the way he placed himself between her and the others, as if shielding her from invisible threats. She wanted to tell him to stop, to leave her alone, but the words never left her lips. That night, when they returned to the chamber, Lyra finally spoke again. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling. "Do you not see what you have done? You have tied yourself to me. My people will never accept you. They will wait for the first mistake, the first crack, and then they will destroy you." Daniel looked at her calmly, his face half in shadow from the fire. "Then let them try. I've faced death before, and I'll face it again if I must. But if it means you live, it's worth it." Lyra's chest tightened. Her throat burned as if she wanted to cry, but she would not allow herself such weakness. She turned away, hiding her face in the firelight. "You are a fool human," she whispered. Daniel gave a faint smile, though his eyes were weary. "Maybe. But I'm your fool now." The chamber fell silent, but it was no longer the heavy silence of strangers. It was something different, something dangerous and fragile. Lyra felt her heart beating faster, not from fear, but from something she could not name. The human had lied for her, risked everything for her. She told herself it meant nothing, yet in the quiet of that night, she could not push away the truth. For the first time in her life, she wondered if her fate with him might not be a curse, but a choice waiting to be made. The palace buzzed with whispers that grew sharper with every passing hour. Servants lowered their voices when Daniel walked through the halls, but their stares followed him like knives. He heard the mutters. "The princess belongs to a human. A shame to her bloodline. This cannot stand." The rumors spread fast, and with them came hatred. Many wanted him dead, not because he had won fairly in the arena, but because he had broken their pride by surviving. Lyra felt the weight of those whispers too. Every step she took seemed heavier, her people's eyes burning her with judgment. Yet Daniel walked at her side, silent, steady, a wall between her and the storm. She had never asked for his protection, but he gave it anyway. She hated the way it comforted her, hated the way it made her feel less alone. One evening, when the shadows stretched long across the palace, Lyra sat across from Daniel in their guarded chamber. The firelight flickered on her face as she spoke quietly, her voice sharp but unsure. "They will never accept you. You are a stranger, an outsider. They will wait for you to slip, and then they will kill you." Daniel met her eyes, calm but firm. "Then let them wait. I'm not here for their acceptance." Her hands tightened into fists. "Then why stay? Why risk yourself for me?" His answer came without hesitation. Because I don't see you as they do. You are not a prize to be passed like an object. You are worth more than their laws, more than their whispers. Her heart stuttered at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not her father, not the council, not the warriors who had courted her with titles and power. She wanted to argue, to call him foolish again, but the fire in his voice made her fall silent. That night, the storm broke. Long after the palace had quieted, when the corridors were empty and the guards outside the chamber shifted lazily in their posts, danger slipped in. A faint scrape of metal against stone, a whisper of movement. Daniel's eyes snapped open instantly. His instincts, honed by years of survival, warned him before the threat revealed itself. The door creaked, and 3 shadows entered, cloaked in dark armor, blades drawn. Assassins, sent to erase the shame of a human claiming the princess. Daniel rose quickly, placing himself between Lyra and the intruders. His body still ached from old wounds, but he clenched his fists, ready to fight. "Stay behind me," he said without looking at her. Lyra froze, her breath caught in her throat. She had expected whispers, maybe threats, but not this. Not blades in the dark, meant to kill them both. The assassins moved fast, their weapons flashing in the dim light. Daniel snatched up a broken piece of wood from near the fire, raising it like a weapon. He blocked the first strike, the force of it jolting through his body, and countered with a quick punch that sent the attacker stumbling back. The second assassin lunged, blade aimed at Daniel's chest. He twisted, barely dodging, but the sharp edge cut across his side. Warm blood spilled, staining his bandages. Pain flared, but Daniel didn't falter. He pushed forward, striking the assassin's throat with the wood until the figure dropped to the ground, gasping for breath. Lyra's heart pounded wildly. She wanted to scream, to call for guards, but her body refused to move. All she could do was watch as the human fought like a cornered beast, every strike fueled by determination, not desperation. The third assassin circled around, eyes on Lyra. She gasped and stumbled back as the blade lifted toward her. Before it could strike, Daniel roared, throwing himself between them. The sword cut deep across his arm, blood running down to his hand, but he caught the assassin's wrist and twisted with all his strength. Bone cracked. The blade clattered to the floor. Daniel drove his fist into the assassin's face, sending him crashing into the wall. The chamber shook with the force, and silence followed. Breathing heavily, Daniel dropped the piece of wood, his arm dripping with blood. His chest rose and fell quickly, but his eyes went straight to Lyra. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough, urgent. She shook her head slowly, her body trembling. "No, but you." Her words caught. She rushed to him, her hands hovering over his wounds, not knowing where to touch, her eyes filled with panic. "You fool. Why protect me? I'm not worth dying for." Daniel's eyes locked on hers, steady even through the pain. "You are worth more than you know." The words struck her harder than the attack itself. Her throat burned, her heart twisting painfully in her chest. She pressed her hands against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding, her touch trembling. "I do not understand you," she whispered, her voice breaking. He gave a faint, tired smile. "Maybe you don't have to. Just know I'd rather bleed than see them hurt you." Her eyes blurred, though she fought against the tears. She had spent her whole life being strong, being untouchable, but here she was, shaking as she tried to save a man who had chosen her life over his again and again. The guards finally burst through the door. Too late, their eyes widening at the scene. 3 assassins on the ground, the human standing wounded but alive, the princess clutching him as if she could hold him together with her hands. The commander's voice thundered in the hall soon after, demanding answers, but Lyra ignored him. For the first time, she didn't care what her people saw. She pressed her forehead against Daniel's shoulder, her whisper for him alone. "Don't die. Not for me." His hand lifted weakly, brushing against her arm, his voice faint but sure. "For you always." And in that moment, with blood on his skin and her heart racing against her will, Lyra realized the truth she had been fighting to deny. This human was not her curse. He was her shield. And maybe, just maybe, he was the only one who had ever truly seen her. The council chamber was vast, lit by towering flames that cast long shadows across the carved stone walls. Hundreds of alien nobles and warriors filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the center of the hall where Daniel and Lyra stood. The air was thick with judgment and expectation, the weight of tradition pressing down on them like a mountain. At the far end, the High Council sat in silence, their faces stern, their eyes cold. The commander stepped forward, his voice booming. The time has come. The law demands proof. If the human's claim is false, both will die. If true, then she belongs to him by right, and no one shall challenge it. His words struck like iron, leaving no room for mercy. Daniel stood tall despite his wounds, his arms still wrapped in bloody cloth. His face was pale, but his eyes held fire. He felt every stare burn into him, but he refused to look away. He had not come this far to kneel. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had spent her life following laws she had no say in, trapped in duty and expectation. But as she looked at Daniel beside her, his body broken yet unyielding, something inside her shifted. She remembered the way he had refused to touch her, the way he had bled to protect her, the way he had called her worth more than chains and tradition. No one had ever seen her like that before. No one had ever chosen her for who she was, not for what her title made her. The commander turned his sharp eyes on Lyra. "Speak, princess. Is the human your rightful victor, or is he a liar who mocked our law?" A hush fell over the hall. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed to wait for her answer. Lyra's throat was dry, her body trembling, but she forced herself to meet the commander's gaze. Her voice was soft at first, but steady. "Yes, he is mine." The crowd gasped, a wave of shock rolling through the chamber. The nobles whispered furiously, some outraged, some disbelieving. But Lyra's words did not stop. She took a step forward, standing taller, her silver eyes burning with new strength. "He is mine not because of your law, not because of this trial. He is mine because I choose him." Daniel's breath caught. For a moment, the weight of her words seemed unreal. She had spoken them before all, before her people, before the council. His chest tightened, his heart pounding harder than it had in any battle. The commander's face twisted in anger. "You dare defy our sacred traditions with such words? You risk your throne, your bloodline, your honor." Lyra raised her chin higher, her voice ringing clear. "What honor is there in chains? What strength is there in forcing what should be chosen? If our law demands I be nothing more than a prize, then it is not law but slavery." The hall erupted into chaos. Some shouted in rage, calling her a traitor to her people. Others stared in silence, shaken by the courage of her defiance. The High Council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Daniel stepped forward then, his voice cutting through the noise. "If your law is so strong, why does it fear a choice? I fought your champions. I bled in your arena. I lived where they fell. Yet even now, I ask for nothing except her freedom to choose. If you call that weakness, then your strength is a lie." The chamber fell into stunned silence. His words, spoken with raw honesty, echoed against the walls like thunder. For the first time, Lyra saw doubt flicker in the eyes of the nobles. The commander's fists clenched, but before he could speak again, one of the elder council members raised a hand. His voice was deep and old, carrying the weight of years. "The law has been satisfied. The princess has spoken. She has claimed the human of her own will. That is enough." The chamber shook with cries of protest, but the elder's authority silenced many. The decision was made. By both law and choice, Lyra belonged to Daniel now. Lyra stepped closer to him, her hand reaching out. For the first time, she touched his hand in front of all, her grip firm and steady. Gasps rippled through the hall as she stood beside him openly, no longer hiding, no longer ashamed. Daniel's eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, the world around them vanished. He saw not a princess, not a duty, but a woman who had chosen him when she could have let him die. And in her eyes, she saw not a human prisoner, not a shameful victor, but the only man who had given her freedom. The commander's face twisted with fury, but even he could not strike against the council's ruling. He stormed from the chamber, his armor clattering with rage. Many followed, whispering dark promises of revenge. But others watched in silence, their hearts moved by what they had witnessed. As the chamber emptied, Daniel turned to Lyra, his voice low, meant only for her. "You didn't have to do that." Her eyes softened, her hand still gripping his tightly. "Yes, I did, because for the first time, I chose something for myself." He stared at her, words failing him. She had been ordered to share her first night with the victor, but now she stood before him not by order, not by law, but by her own will. Outside, the crowd roared with division, some calling for blood, others stunned into silence. The future was uncertain, filled with danger and rebellion. But inside that hall, something unbreakable had been forged. That night, as the stars stretched across the sky, Daniel realized he was no longer just her protector. He was her choice. And Lyra, for the first time in her life, was free, not because she was a princess, but because she had spoken her own truth. And so, the law that was meant to bind them had become the bond that set them both free.